Let's now talk about hacking. What is it? There's some terminology you're going to need to know as you take the exam. First of all, hacking. You're exploiting system vulnerabilities. You're compromising security. You're trying to gain unauthorized access. You're modifying systems or application features to try to achieve a goal, but it's all unauthorized. You're trying to steal or redistribute intellectual property. In other words, put it on the internet, right? And this will lead to business loss for your victim. Hacking originally had a three-part model. Now it's been expanded out quite a bit over the years. But it boils down to these three most basic phases. The first one is reconnaissance. You're doing some recon. That can include open source intelligence, footprinting, or active scanning and fingerprinting. More on that soon. Then, once we have identified potential targets, we try to break in. That's penetration. This is the active part of hacking. We're delivering the malware, or we're taking advantage of social engineering or physical intrusion. Once we've broken in, we maintain control. We'll plant back doors. We'll instruct zombies. We'll cover our tracks. So this is the original traditional concept of hacking. As I said, it's split out quite a bit. Who's a hacker? Well, obviously, you've got some intelligence. You have excellent computer skills. You have excellent networking skills. At least you should. And you're good at exploring systems and networks. You could be a hobbyist, testing vulnerabilities of systems and networks. You could be a consultant, a pen tester, hired by an organization to identify weaknesses to improve their network security. You could be a criminal. We usually think of cyber criminals when we think hackers. Not all hackers, per se, are criminals. Really, anyone who attempts to gain knowledge for legal or illegal purposes by trying to break into something. There are different types of hackers, what we call hacker classes. And the first three refer to a hat color. Now, this goes back to the old Western movies where the good guys wore white hats, the bad guys wore black hats. So that's been kind of borrowed. The black hat hacker is a criminal. They do stuff for malicious purposes. Maybe it's bragging rights, maybe it's to make money, maybe it's to take down an enemy, but they are not doing things because they're nice. On the other side of the spectrum is the white hat, the ethical hacker. That's us. The ethical hacker does things to fix, to heal, not to harm. We try to discover stuff before the black hats do. We try to expose the vulnerabilities so they can be fixed. And then somewhere in the middle is the gray hat. Now, these folks claim that their motivation is intellectual curiosity, but they will do good or bad activities, and they won't have permission. Hopefully, they'll tell the vendor or the organization what they discovered before truly malicious people can get into it. But that's black, gray, and white hat. Then you have the script kiddie or skitty. These are folks who really don't have any skills. They're using other people's tools. They'll use other people's scripts or programs, and they'll just look at tutorials on the internet. We then have the really serious, really dangerous ones, the state-sponsored hacker. These are supported by a foreign adversary, some government, to perform attacks on other governments or high-profile targets. Then we have the hacktivist. This is someone who will hack for a political agenda or for a cause. Usually they'll deface somebody's website or they'll try to expose what they consider to be the wrongdoings of a company. We also have the suicide hacker. Now, these are folks who will just do what they do, get the job done, and they are not afraid of going to jail. There are also cyber terrorists, and their whole motivation is they've got extreme political or religious beliefs, and they just want to terrorize, create fear or disruption. So you can see examples here of the different hacker types, just some of them. Let's talk a little bit about the state-sponsored actor, the advanced persistent threat. Now, APTs, for the most part, are state-sponsored because they have all kinds of money and resources put into them to do whatever they want to do. They are external. They are quietly trying to gain access to your system and stay there for as long as possible. That's why they're persistent. They're usually sponsored by a nation state, and they're usually well-funded. They will use multiple attack vectors, whatever they can, to gain access to systems and data. We can use them for intelligence gathering operations against governments, military, commercial networks. And we've had high-profile cases in the news of APTs exfiltrating or stealing and exposing corporate and government data. Let's see some examples. Here's APT-27. One of its names is Lucky Mouse. The reason why they're often referred to just by the number is that they will often go by several different names. So Lucky Mouse is a Chinese group. They mostly focus on Asian Pacific nations or Middle Eastern states, and they mostly target aerospace, education, and government sectors. And they'll use existing tools, PSExec, Mimikatz, ProcDump, others. Then we have APT-28, Fancy Bear. This is a Russian cyber espionage group. They're sponsored by the Russian government. They're associated with the Russian Military Intelligence Agency, the GRU. They target NATO-aligned countries. They use zero-day exploits. They make their own malware. They make their own phishing and malware tools. Then we have APT-35, Charming Kitten. They actually go by several kitten names. This is the Iranian government. That's their cyber warfare group. They depend on phishing and social media for the most part. They developed a tool to steal data from the really popular email providers like Google and Yahoo and Microsoft. There is documented interference in the US 2020 and 2022 elections that goes back to Charming Kitten, Fancy Bear as well. Then we have this North Korean group, APT-37, and I'm just hitting on the most notorious. There are plenty of others. This one of their names is Reaper, and they're a North Korean government hacking group. They mostly target South Korean vertical industries like chemical, electronics, manufacturing, aerospace, automotive, and healthcare. And in fact, APT-37, it just drives me crazy to see people take advantage of people's pain and suffering. And APT-37 has a classic example of that. At the end of October in 2022, just a little while ago, there was a tragedy in which there was a bunch of people at an event. There was a stampede. Lots of folks inadvertently got crushed, killed more than 150 people. And APT-37 used social engineering to trick South Koreans into downloading malicious files. They took advantage of that tragedy to their own purposes. We finally have one more thing called the insider threat. This is not necessarily a hacker per se. This is somebody who is a trusted user, and they abuse or misuse your system, your network. Most insider threats are not deliberately, not intentionally malicious. They cause accidents. They cause accidental breaches. Now, some could be purposeful. Some could be disgruntled employee, corporate or government spy, somebody who was terminated, but we forgot to revoke their access when we terminated them. So that's our look at hackers and hacking. Now on to the next topic.